Amadeus makes the experience of travel better for everyone everywhere by inspiring innovation, partnerships, and responsibility to people, places, and planet. Our technology powers the travel and tourism industry, inspiring more open ways of working, more connected ways of thinking, centered around the traveler. Our open platform connects the global travel and hospitality ecosystem, from startups to big industry players and governments too. Together, redesigning the travel of tomorrow. Amadeus, it's how travel works. Visit us to know more, amadeus.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Skift India Travel Podcast, where we break down the stories shaping the travel industry in India. My name is Peden, and I'm Skift's Asia editor. And today, we're going to dive into Air India and Vistara, the two big names in Indian aviation, but soon only one is going to remain. As it curtains down for Vistara, I'm here with my colleague, Ashab Rizvi, who's a research analyst at Skift, to discuss if this is a smart move or a mistake that could come back to haunt the Tatas. Welcome, Ashab.
Hello, Peden. How are you?
I'm good, Ashab. How are you? And are you all set for a conversation today?
Yes, absolutely. It's a great topic, and let's go again.
Yes. I think offline we've been discussing this a lot, Ashab. So,
Yep.
now we are doing it for our readers. Ashab, let's start with the basics, right? On
Sure.
November 11th, Vistara is officially saying goodbye and it's merging into Air India. Now, it's no surprise, but still many are wondering why kill off such a well loved brand like Vistara? Vistara's reputation for premium service stands in, if I may use the word, stark contrast to Air India, which has struggled with an outdated image. And then, of course, there has been this long history of, mismanagement. But the Tatas kind of seem committed to the Air India brand. So, is it all about pride, or is there a deeper strategy at play here?
Sure. So I guess let's to understand why this merger is actually happening right now, and why this entire consolidation is happening, and why they're basically killing the Vistara brand. So I guess let's go back all the way to 2014, when the Tatas entered into the airline industry in a partnership with Singapore Airlines, and that's when the Vistara brand came along. And in the last 10 years, as you have rightly pointed out, it has arguably become the one of the best and most loved carrier in India, the Vistara brand. Everything about the brand was very refreshing, whether it was the crew uniform, whether it was the cabin, everything about the airline was very refreshing. But now the Tata brand wants to now the Vistara brand is going to come under the Air India group, and effectively from 12th, as you've pointed out, 12th of November, the brand will cease to exist. So I guess the strategy that the Tatas want to have here is they don't want two of their own brands competing, right? So Vistara flies all the way to London, right? And as you know, very recently, Air India has already announced that they'll be using their A350s on flights from Delhi to London. So if the Vistara brand would have continued to exist, and Air India already is with this new brand that's coming in, and with their newer wide bodies, they would effectively compete on same routes, right? So what Air India effectively decided was that once we get the Vistara brand under its belt, it's going to harmonize operations for us, because they don't want to cannibalize their own another airline
But Ashab,
as
Ashab,
Air India
don't you
continues.
think that there's already so much demand from India? I mean, like, look at the outbound travel that's happening from India. So, don't you think that there's already so much demand that there might have been a place for both the brands to exist?
That's a valid point, Peden. That's a valid point. But I think the underlying assumption here is that it's better from a network perspective, network planning
Mhm.
perspective, and an overall organization to function as one instead of having two different brands. Now, here's another point that we have to understand. Both the Air India group, the Air India airline, the individual airline, as well as Vistara, they're both full service carriers, right? So they'll
Correct.
effectively compete on international routes. They'll have wide body aircrafts. They'll both have premium services, right? So now, had Vistara been a low cost airline like Air India Express or like Scoot is with Singapore Airlines, it would have been better, and perhaps there would have been a
Yeah,
scenario where
complementary.
both
It would
would
have
have
been
stayed
more
together,
complementary.
because there would have been little overlap between those two airlines, and one airline could effectively serve as a feeder carrier to another. But because
Mhm.
they were both full service carriers, I think it probably is a right decision to merge both the airlines, because then they'll be able to operate, especially their focus being long haul and ultra long haul. I think that's precisely the reason they don't want to cannibalize each other's operations. And I do get the point that there is plenty of demand coming from, especially our bigger cities, there's a lot of appetite for international travel. But I guess from an speaking specifically from an airline's perspective and an airline operations perspective, it's just better to have one single airline and harmonizing the entire operation instead of having two different. And you already know Air India, the Tata Group is already struggling with making Air India operationally efficient. Imagine if you have another airline that is already doing very well, so that also becomes like a small benchmark that Air India needs to compete now. Instead of competing with other carriers, they first have to compete with another carrier that is owned by the same group, right? So they just wanted to eliminate any internal competition, just get everything under a single umbrella. And I guess that's what the decision that they've made.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the sun will have to set on Vistara for Air India to rise, right? I mean, like if we put that context there.
Yeah.
Also, Ashab, in the wake of the Air India Vistara merger, the future of one of India's top loyalty programs, the Club Vistara, is set to change. Of course, Air India has announced that Club Vistara will merge with the Air India Flying Returns program, and Club Vistara members, holding a co-branded credit card, which is very common for Vistara, can also breathe easy now for because they'll continue to enjoy their current benefits, which are some if you free tickets, complimentary tickets, etc. Under the existing terms until I think March 31st, 2026. That's what it said. What's also important is that this is also a great shift in the Indian loyalty, aviation loyalty space. And of course, there are more details on how the programs will indicate are yet to unfold. But people, whenever I'm discussing the Air India Vistara merger, the next question is always about what about Club Vistara? What is going to happen to Club Vistara? So what do you make of this? I mean, like because as a concerned Club Vistara member, I think everybody would want to know because of course the airline was great, and then the perks with the loyalty program that came with the loyalty program and the co-branded credit cards were great.
Right. I mean, I do understand your concern, and I am actually a very avid follower of the loyalty space in India and the way it's growing right now. But let's set some context first, right? Club Vistara was one of the most premier loyalty programs in India, and I guess a pioneer in multiple spaces as well. Because the way they started, effectively before Club Vistara, we did not have a true airline loyalty program in India until
Correct.
Club Vista came along, right? And they've had everything. They had great airline partnerships, non-airline partnerships. They had their own co-branded credit cards, right? Uh, but from what is happening right now, I guess once the merger is also taking place on the loyalty programs, and we've already seen Flying Returns, which is Air India's loyalty program, is a they've refurbished that program as well. It's a completely new program, completely new partnerships. And so what's going to happen is all the points that one has had, the Club Vistara points will go at a 1v1 ratio and convert into Flying Return points. They haven't provided any update on what's going to happen to their co-branded credit cards. We've still waiting updates on what's going to happen. They said they'll be sharing updates in the coming weeks. But when it comes to airline partnerships, right? So Club Vistara used to have exclusive partnerships with Air Canada, Lufthansa, Singapore Airlines, Japan Airlines. Now, as your Zara points move to Air India flying return
Mhm.
points, and Air India is part of the Star Alliance member, you could still book tickets for Air Canada, which is part of Star Alliance, Lufthansa, which is also part of Star Alliance, and Singapore Airlines, again part of Star Alliance. But when it comes to Japan Airlines, that's not part of Star Alliance. Like it's ANA, that's part of all Nippon Airlines, that's part of Star Alliance. So effectively, all bookings, that were made for Japan Airlines will be cancelled, and there will be a refund. So there are all those specific scenarios and specific bookings for partner airlines that are actually not partners with Air India right now, those will effectively get cancelled. And that's just on the part of airline partnerships. When you look at non-airline partnerships, that's another different ball game, because Vistara's non-airline partnership was huge, right? They had health and wellness partners, like, and they had car rental partners, retail lifestyle partners. Now, some of those partnerships, some of those benefits are definitely going to go away, right?
Yeah, I think they
Plus,
had a tie-up with Booking.com also, right? For booking
yes,
holidays and hotels.
yes, and you can continue to earn those points with bookings.com, but I think that's still they've set a date for that as well, which is 31st of October 2024. So those are all those points, and there's still I guess in the months to come, in the weeks to come, we'll see a lot more clarity on what's going to happen. But yes, along with the Vistara brand going down, I'm personally a lot more upset that the Club Vistara loyalty program is going away, because it was arguably one of the better programs out there in this part of the world.
Correct. Yeah, and you could redeem flights very easily. It was very easy. It was very seamless.
Correct, correct, absolutely.
Of course, that was about loyalty programs, Ashab. Now let's talk about the bigger picture. Since the Tatas took over Air India, they've made some improvements. New planes, upgraded services, and most importantly, better food. But the question is, has that been enough? Because the airline is still carrying the baggage from years of government mismanagement. The turnaround is, of course, slow. And for a carrier with such a long history, of course, change is not going to happen overnight. But when you are carrying this kind of a baggage, is Air India transforming fast enough to compete, especially against the Middle Eastern big three like Emirates, Etihad, Qatar? And that also brings us to Air India's biggest challenge, competing on long haul and ultra long haul routes. With newer aircraft in the pipeline, can Air India finally go toe to toe with these Middle Eastern heavyweights? And then, of course, there's also Turkish Airlines and emerging players like Saudi Arabian Airlines, Riyadh Air is coming in. So these carriers have long dominated the entire international travel, especially from India to Europe and the US. So can Air India be able to, the new merged identity, can it regain that place?
Amadeus makes the experience of travel better for everyone everywhere by inspiring innovation, partnerships, and responsibility to people, places, and planet. Our technology powers the travel and tourism industry, inspiring more open ways of working, more connected ways of thinking, centered around the traveler. Our open platform connects the global travel and hospitality ecosystem, from startups to big industry players and governments too, together redesigning the travel of tomorrow. Amadeus, it's how travel works. Visit us to know more, amadeus.com.
So I guess let's just answer the questions in different parts, right? Let's look at the transformation, the way it's going right now for Air India. And you've rightly pointed out, right, that some aspects of the airline are still horrible. I mean, the experience overall is horrible. Like, if you fly one of their older aircrafts, the branding, the cabin, the cabin services, the in-flight entertainment, everything, it is just below average, honestly. And there is for all the furore that's happening about how great this transformation is looking and how great this new livery looks like, right? It just does not feel like that. So I guess right now their entire focus is on building new network, and is, I guess, very much concentrated on improving services on their newer aircrafts, their newer incoming aircrafts. So now you already know Air India has a massive wide body aircrafts, and Campbell Wilson very recently on the Skift India summit said that they will be getting a newer aircraft almost every week until 2027, right? So with these newer aircrafts coming in, they've already deployed the A350s, their newer A350s on routes to Dubai. They've announced that they'll be flying, they've already started flying to London. And from November onwards, I think they're also flying directly to Nevada as well. So their entire focus right now seems to be on making sure that the perception in the eyes of some of their high yield passengers flying all the way to Dubai, London, and New York is changing. So I guess that's where their first focus is. And domestic doesn't necessarily look like is something that they're very very focused. But I guess it's going to take at least 2.5 years for any real uh, transformation to be seen, in my opinion. I guess overall the transformation is happening on specific routes with specific aircrafts. But for an outsider to watch and come with an opinion that this entire transformation is happening, I guess it's going to take at least a few more years for us. So I guess that's the first.
Mhm.
That's just my opinion on where exactly this transformation is headed. But I guess if you've heard this, Peden, there was a lot of conversation even when Air India was going global and it was getting passed along to the Tatas that now under the Tatas, they are going to effectively not just compete with the Middle Eastern big three, but they will effectively dismantle them, right? And more and more people will choose to fly directly with Air India instead of choosing to fly with Emirates or Etihad or Qatar or Turkish. And we have got Saudia now. We have a couple of European carriers that also do a lot of international. They take a lot of Indian internationals on their aircrafts as well. So guys, in my opinion, I think we still need to give the Tatas and Air India at least the next 5 years for them to be even at a point where they are at a level playing field. And let me give you some numbers. And I guess this would also be very, very interesting for some of our audiences as well. So, Air India, let's just look at the connectivity between India and the US, and the US happens to be a very big market for Air India as well, right? So, Air India has direct flights to the US from just three Indian cities, which is Bangalore, Mumbai, and Delhi. And they're flying to just four cities, effectively four cities and five airports. They're flying to New York,
New York.
JFK. They're flying to New Jersey, which is just right next to JFK. They're also flying to San Francisco, Chicago,
Yeah.
and Washington, Dulles. These are the only five cities that Air India is right now connecting to directly from three Indian cities, right? And they're like, well, we're going to beat the Middle Eastern carriers. Well, I've got news for them. You just cannot beat them. And the reason is simple because Emirates, for example, connects with nine Indian cities, and in the US, Emirates goes to 15 different cities. So
Mhm.
if you are, let's say, if I'm living in Lucknow or you are living in Jaipur or somebody else is living in Pune, and if you're taking an Air India flight, you still have to take a one-stop flight to the US. You either have to fly from Air India to Bangalore or Mumbai or Delhi to go to the US. And again, the connectivity in the US is just five cities. So if you have to go to Houston, you still cannot take an Air India flight. Now,
Mhm.
if you choose to fly either with Emirates or EY, they'll still give you a one stop connection. But instead of a one stop connection in domestic India, they'll give you a one stop connection either in Doha, Abu Dhabi, or Dubai. And they can fly directly from that one stop location all the way to 15 or 14 locations.
And let's not forget the stopover programs that they have as well,
They
right?
have
I mean,
amazing
like whether it
stopover
is
programs.
Qatar, Turkish, or Etihad, they have some really good stopover programs.
Absolutely. They have amazing stopover programs. And a lot of the people who are traveling to all of these cities, these are aspirational Indians who want to go and try new places as well, right? So if I was given an opportunity to stay in Abu Dhabi for 2 days for free, I think I'm going to take that, right? And
Exactly.
just so you know, I'm actually flying to the US next week on Etihad, and one of the reason is that they're giving me a 2 day free layover in Abu Dhabi. So I guess those are certain perks as well that are offered, and a lot of the leisure travelers who are flying from India all the way to the US, all the way to Europe, they would be these kinds of offers would be very very appealing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
To Istanbul, right?
You know,
They give you
I
a
need
free
to.
ticket to Istanbul.
Yes, and I need to share that, in May when I went to Scandinavia, even I flew Etihad and I took the 2 night stay at, and this time also when I'm flying to the US next week. So I'm taking the stopover visa program in. So yeah, of course. I think
It's a I guess in terms of just the network right now. In terms of
yeah.
just the network right now, Air India stands nowhere when compared to these Middle Eastern carriers. If I am living in Hyderabad, Air India does the connectivity that Air India offers me, that I either fly to Bangalore and then I go directly to the US to just 5 cities. But if I want to go to Houston from Hyderabad, Emirates offers me a one-stop connectivity, and I don't have to go through a different connection. So I guess the connectivity that these Middle Eastern carriers have, not only just in India but also in the US, is a very big reason why people continue to choose them. And let's just not forget the fact that these are some of the best airlines, and you get some of the best in-flight entertainment. Like, they are known, their
Absolutely.
soft product strategy is at the center of their entire commercial strategy, and it's very difficult for newer carriers like Air India and others to go ahead and head on and compete with them. So I guess all of these factors, from the fact that they have a wider network in India itself. Imagine a foreign carrier having a much better international network in India than Air India itself. So I guess those are all the reasons why it's going to take at least the next 4 to 5 years for Air India to establish itself, and they've already started doing so, right? They've already started
Correct.
establishing an MRO facility in Bangalore, and they've made Bangalore as their second hub in the country. So they want to establish more in the southern part of India. But it's going to take a while for them to be at a point where they can effectively say that, okay, now it's level playing field for us, which is also, as you know, is also in their interest, because the Middle Eastern countries have been trying to get more and more bilateral,
Yes.
trying to
Bilateral.
renegotiate
Right.
the
Yes.
bilateral agreement so that they can get more seats, right? But then India is pushing the government that they need to be at least at a point where they are effectively competing them with them. So they don't want the government to give them any more seats, at least
Yeah,
as
I
of right.
think the think it's in the government wants Indian carriers to be more of a India to turn into an Indian aviation hub, right?
Right.
And of course, what you said is absolutely pertinent. That of course, we need to give Air India time, and the connectivity that that you talked about, it's fantastic. I mean, like those were great insights. I mean, something that I don't think we would have thought of. But yeah, I mean, like if you compare 5 cities and 15 cities, of course, and then within India, the kind of connectivity that the Middle Eastern carriers have. Now,
Exactly.
while we are talking about, when we talk about Indian aviation, I mean, like, of course, it would be remiss of us not to mention Indigo, right, which is India's largest airline. Indigo's built this huge empire on domestic routes, but now Indigo is also eyeing international expansion. And then, of course, it's doing the business class launch and then the loyalty program as well. Indigo's aggressive growth plans and cost efficiency have made it a formidable player. But can it challenge Air India internationally? Before we talk about the Middle Eastern carriers, let's talk about domestic competition within the country between Air India and Indigo. I mean, I want to ask you, of course, both of them, if you look at their plane orders, it's like, but between the two carriers, who's more ambitious, and most importantly, who's more likely to succeed? Of course, this is like this is like doing gazing into a crystal ball. But just tell me, based on your insights.
Yeah, I mean, Indigo is a formidable force. Nobody can argue against it, and I'm never going to bet anything against Indigo. But just so our audience knows, despite the fact that Air India is the flag carrier of the country, it is Indigo that's the largest carrier in India. It's a low cost carrier which happens to be the biggest carrier in India, which in itself says a lot, right? So, and in the last 10, 15 years, what Indigo has done, they effectively control 60% of the total domestic market, which again is, by any stretch of imagination, it's a very big deal. And I mean, for a country that has about 1.5 billion people, for one carrier to control 60% of the domestic market in itself is a very big deal. We should in fact have at least few more carriers, because we are giving Indigo is just continue to dominate. I mean, it's great for Indigo, but it's not so much great for us as passengers, right? And another point about Indigo's dominance is can be seen in the fact that almost 50% of all the routes that Indigo operates, it happens to be the only sole carrier. So they've got exclusivity on like 47, 48% of all the routes that they fly. So if you're flying from Aizawl to Imphal, Indigo is the only carrier that's operating the route. So you just have no other option, and that gives the airline a lot of price power as well. They can effectively price the airline ticket whatever they want, and you'll have to pay because that's the only option for you. So in terms of connectivity and building a moat in the domestic market, Indigo has done very well. But interestingly enough, people often think, okay, Indigo is the biggest international domestic carrier. But here's an interesting fact: when you look at international outbound airline capacity, Indigo actually is also the biggest carrier when you look at short haul international and medium haul international. It's actually much bigger than Air India. And in fact, combined, Air India Express and Air India is still bigger as an entity than Air India and Air India Express combined. So Indigo, using their A320 and A320 family aircrafts, what they've done is they have established short haul and medium haul connections in the region, in within Asia, and very strong connectivity in the UAE, very strong connectivity in Southeast Asia, very strong connectivity in Saudi. So they've done incredibly well, but they haven't stopped there. And as you already know, they've already ordered the A350 wide body aircrafts. So it's like, okay, India is a market that is heavily underserved, heavily underpenetrated, and Air India is growing. So why not go ahead and just order these wide body aircrafts? And we still don't know whether Indigo is going to go full premium, or Indigo will operate on a low cost long haul model. But I think they will effectively add some premium classes. They've already announced that they'll have Indigo Stretch, which is going to be their new business class operated on their A321s between bigger cities, and that'll effectively also be seen on their wide body aircraft. So in terms of just being who's more ambitious, I would go and say slightly leaning more towards Indigo, because for a low cost carrier to start dominating international skies on long and medium haul, and then going beyond that and saying, hey, we're going to order wide body aircrafts and we are going to challenge the flag carrier of the country. So I think that's very ambitious. And they have the advantage of getting feeder traffic from the rest of the country, an advantage that Air India doesn't have right now. Right. So as the country grows and as the appetite for travel grows, Indigo will have the same way as Dubai airport and Emirates operates, that it creates it gets all the feeder traffic from Pakistan and Bangladesh and Saudi, and then they have these A380s going all the way to New York, all the way to Houston, right? So which is what they'll be doing, I guess, using their hubs in Delhi, in Ahmedabad, and they have a lot more hubs than Air India has. Air India just has two hubs.
Absolutely.
There's a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, like they are the this domestic connectivity. They are number one, right?
Exactly. So once they start getting, I think it's going to be fun. But Air India does have its own advantages in terms of airport slots, right? The fact that it was the flag carrier of the country. So it has great airport slots at LHR, at JFK, at great
And now
slots.
it will have the brand Vistara brand equity also backing it.
Exactly, that as well, right? And then, so most likely the business passengers will likely choose Air India because of the slots that Air India has at major airports. But we are going to see a lot more leisure passengers taking Indigo, most likely, because of its lean operating model. It'll be more likely in a position to offer cheaper tickets. But again, that is something we'll see by 2027 or 2028, when they'll start inducting the wide bodies.
Absolutely. I think there is some time that we need to wait for this to pan out and see, what happens and how. And keeping my fingers crossed that the transition happens very smoothly for Air India. And in the end, the Air India and Vistara merger is about more than just brands. It's about legacy, pride, and of course the future of Indian aviation as well. Now, the Tatas have taken on a huge challenge, and while they're betting on Air India's long-term potential, they really cannot afford to stumble, right? And as they work to revive a national icon, the entire world is watching. Now, will it be the right call or not? Only time will tell. But thank you, Ashab, for joining in. I enjoyed this conversation thoroughly, and there was such interesting things to take away from this. And thank you for those insights.
Awesome. It was great to be on the show.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Stay with us for more deep dives into the trends shaping global travel. I'll see you all next week. If you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other platform, please subscribe, rate us 5 stars, or leave a positive review. Your support helps us spread the word about the Skift India Travel Podcast and ensures we can keep bringing you free content every week. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to the Skift channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated whenever a new video drops. Thank you for your support.